Andrew Urquhart with you on the program today. Have you heard of anti-natalism? No, I'm not talking those terrifying sessions that you go to with your wife when you're about to have your first baby, and not antenatal, but anti-natalism. It is something which I've honestly found out a lot more about in the last 24 hours because I knew that my next guest has been doing some research on this topic. Matt Maslin is part of the theology team at Laidlaw College. He joins me on the program now. Matt, kia ora. Good morning.
Kia ora.
Thanks for your time.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Now, so definitions, anti-natalism, this is for people that don't want to have children, essentially?
Yeah, the way I kind of explain anti-natalism is that it's people who not only see having children as undesirable, but actually they see it as immoral. So It's not just that they don't want to have kids, but they kind of see it as an immoral thing to do because of the way the world is heading, essentially.
Gosh, that comes as a bit of a shock and processing that, because I know for some people, it doesn't fit in with the lifestyle, and you got study and you got mortgages and all those sorts of things. But to say that it's actually immoral, where does this come from? Has this idea been around for a while?
It's actually quite a relatively new idea. There's kind of been strands of anti-natalist thought throughout history, but there's kind of three different strands where we've seen this thought come to light. One of which is there's kind of some anti-natalist movements. So one of them is the voluntary human extinction movement.
Wow.
And they're quite a popular movement. And they're focused on advocacy and actually really trying to get people to have less children. So this movement, they sell merchandise where they can you can buy signs to put in the back of your car, no babies on board, or you can get a T-shirt that says join the vasectomy club. These people are advocating to for people not to have children, and that might be because of environmental reasons or I don't know, a myriad of other reasons. But then there's also philosophical arguments that have come forward in the last couple of decades by intellectuals who say, well, the best way to prevent suffering is to not be human at all. And so if you want to stop your kids from suffering, well, just don't have them. That's essentially the core of a lot of philosophical arguments around it. And then the movement I'm mostly interested in is more the mainstream movement of just your average everyday people who no longer see it as morally viable to have children in this world. And we see these movements kind of surface on online platforms. You see Facebook groups that have been joining and following, and on websites like Reddit. There's a subreddit, anti-natalism subreddit with 200,000 people on it regularly posting about anti-natalist ideas. So there's just different streams of anti-natalist thought, but I guess the common thread among them all is this inability to picture the future in a positive and hopeful way, really.
Wow. So in essence, it's saying because bad things may happen to my children, because my children may have uncomfortable or difficult circumstances, because pain may be part of their life, it's actually more humane not to put them through that and not have children at all. And literally throwing out the baby with the bathwater on this one and saying no to the opportunity for joy and for pleasure and for positive things by saying, but what if something bad happens?
Yeah, and in some ways, I can be quite sympathetic towards this movement. If you think about things like climate change, if you think about geopolitics at the moment, like Israel and Palestine, Russia and Ukraine, if you think about some of the economic and political situations that are happening globally, things. When I was younger, I thought the world would be a better place when I grew up. Yep. But now, young people I work with they can't imagine the world in a positive way. So in a sense, I think the church needs to be a place that enacts hope, that we need to show young people and anti-natalists what hope really looks like. Yeah. But I also think we need to be a bit more dialed in about how we speak about hope. It's not this pie in the sky when you die kind of situation, but actually the amazing thing about Christian hope is its resilience, right? Hope survives in places it really shouldn't. It perseveres even when it's crushed, it still somehow seems to remain. So we need a more resilient understanding of hope, but we also need to understand that hope, especially as presented in the New Testament, is actually contradictory to our circumstances.
Yeah.
So if you feel like the world is overwhelming, if you feel like things are out of control, that's actually the place where hope happens.
Yeah.
It has to be contradictory to our circumstances. That's just by definition what hope is.
And you don't need hope if everything's perfect, right? I mean, that's why the book of Isaiah, written in one of the darkest periods of Israel history, is such a beacon of hope, because it was light in the darkness as opposed to a light on a sunny day.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, in a sense, this is a very unusual movement, and it feels quite extreme.
Mm-hmm.
But in another sense, when we consider some of the things going on in the world, and when we consider what that might look like through a secular framework, people don't really have the resources to navigate the future in a hopeful and meaningful way. And this is a big opportunity for the church and its public theology to think about, how do we communicate what the future looks like, if we're doing that with an understanding that we follow a loving and trustworthy God who holds the world together.
And I imagine that this movement, this anti-natalism, is more prevalent amongst people who don't have a faith. Is that generally the case, that's where this hopelessness comes from?
Yeah, there is more of a kind of secular angle to anti-natalist thought. Interestingly, though, one of the biggest philosophers on the anti-natalist movement, Robert Zandberg, and he's a South African philosopher, he is big on anti-natalism. He's convinced by all the ideas, but he considers himself a non-practicing anti-natalist. So he writes all the stuff on it and goes, "Oh, but I want to have children, and I don't know what to do with that. I still have this drive to bring life into this world, but I'm a non-practicing anti-natalist."
Well, hey.
So I think even within this secular worldview, there's still something within us that thinks, I don't know, there's something in bringing life into this world.
Exactly.
And giving people the experience to experience, yes, unfortunately, suffering and the lows of humanity, but also, like you mentioned, joy and happiness and love and the other parts that come with life as well.
Yeah, I think biologically, I think the world defines success as the ability to be able to replicate yourself in that regard. And some people might, I suppose, see that to be a little bit selfish. That from an anti-natalist point of view, saying, I have to have a little mini me version of myself, that there's ego and there's selfishness tied up in that. Is that behind some of the philosophy, perhaps?
Yeah, probably where you see it more so than in the philosophy is in, these Facebook pages and these Reddit groups, is they're really quite condescending towards people who choose to have children. They present them as selfish people, essentially, and they have a nickname for them, which is breeders. So they refer to them as breeders, which again, is quite condescending. But it is driven by this view that, these people who have children are just selfish, and they're doing it for their own needs, and they're just trying to self-replicate. And
interesting stuff indeed, and also very interesting to see, I suppose, the chickens coming home to roost. Again, bit of a mixed metaphor on this one, but with countries who have a declining birth rate, or who have had government policy which would pressure people to have a declining birth rate, the implications for those societies within the next one or two generations is certainly not a positive outcome for those nations or for those economies.
Yeah. There is a kind of material consequence to these kind of ideologies. And it's hard to be an advocate of this movement, because your success is, I don't know, when your movement doesn't exist anymore, you're really trying to, breed yourself out of a movement. So it's an interesting topic. It's one I think more and more people are becoming aware of, and these softer versions that you might come across with whānau or friends that you have that might be hesitant to to bring children into this world.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I would make this distinction though between not desiring to have children and seeing it as immoral to have children, and that's really the difference in the anti-natalist movement. Is people think it's immoral to have kids.
But certainly opportunities to have some hope-filled conversations in that regard, and to give a reason for our own choices to have children, and to the choices that we make, and the hope that brings us within our faith and within our families as well. Matt, appreciate the work that you do. Thanks for a interesting conversation. Thanks for being on the program today.
Yes, thanks so much.